welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're making Keto Chex Mix. My mother made Chex Mix for Christmas every year, and it was a tradition. And when she stopped making it, I would make it every year. I just love it. And anytime we'd go to any holiday party and they had Chex Mix, oh, I was right near the bowl because it is my favorite. So keto, we've been keto carnivore for close to 8 years, and I missed my Chex Mix. So we now have a keto version of Chex Mix that is amazing. So you start off with 3.5 ounces of pork rinds. And, you know, I never thought I'd be using pork rinds. When we first started keto and there were recipes with pork rinds, and I bought all these big tubs of pork rinds, and we both hated it, and we ended up throwing it away. Now, oh man, I'm addicted to pork rinds. I love them. So you break them up into bite-sized pieces. It doesn't really matter how big or how small, just whatever you consider to be a bite-sized piece. Very easy to do. Just break it up, and there you go. So there's about 3.5 ounces in this bowl. This container is what I get at Sam's Club. It's a huge container of pork rinds, and they're so good. But what I do is I don't always like to have all these plastic containers, so I buy a big bag of Max original pork rinds at Walmart, and I keep refilling the jars. All right, to the pork rinds, we add nuts. Now, we don't eat nuts, so when I make this for myself, I don't add nuts. I just do it with the pork rinds, and it's amazing. So if you don't want nuts, don't add them. I'm adding them. We're going to be going to a gathering, so I'll be bringing this so that I have something to eat, and I'll add nuts because most people like nuts. So on my recipe, it says 50 grams of nuts for each one. I'm not going to be adding that because, again, I don't like that many nuts. So I will add 20 to 25 grams of each. Start off with pecan halves, and I just said halves very oddly. Pecan halves. That's about 26 grams. And we add that in. Now, since we don't eat nuts very often, I store all of my nuts in the freezer. So these just came out of the freezer. I put everything in Ziploc bags, and they'll go back in the freezer. I was out shopping, and I saw this small bag of cashews and knew I'd be making this. So I'm like, all right, I'll buy a small bag of cashews. And that is 25 grams of cashews. And I also like peanuts. I used to love peanuts in Chex Mix, and peanuts for keto are maybe, maybe not. Use them if you find peanuts okay. They're not a nut, they're a legume, and some people find them very inflammatory, so add peanuts or not, it's your choice. That's 23 grams of peanuts. And again, as I said, when I make this for just Carl and myself, I don't add any nuts at all because we try not to eat nuts. And then we have walnut halves. Man, why am I saying halves today? So again, 25 grams of walnuts. So this is half of what my recipe calls for. So just know that you don't have to put in all the nuts if you don't want to. We'll set this aside and then do the spices. Now, again, my recipe calls for melted butter. We'd like to be dairy-free, so you can use butter-flavored coconut oil, or my preference is olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. I love olive oil, so I use it often. I love the taste of it. So if you want to be dairy-free and you don't want butter or coconut oil, olive oil is fine. So it's 4 tablespoons of olive oil or butter. One tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. And yes, there's a little bit of sugar in it, but the amount of Worcestershire sauce you're using is not going to make a big deal. And I love Worcestershire sauce. This stuff. So it's 1 tablespoon. Then we have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. You don't need a lot of salt because the Worcestershire sauce is salty. And then 1 teaspoon of granulated garlic. A teaspoon of granulated onion powder. You mix this all up till it's nice and all the onion and garlic powder are incorporated so that you're not having one glob of onion powder or garlic powder, that it's all mixed in. You pour it on the pork rinds and the nuts. I'm just going to mix this up a little so the nuts all aren't on top. And you start pouring the liquid mixture on top of it, trying to get every piece coated. And at first you're like, oh, they're not all going to get coated. That's not a whole lot of liquid, but you'd be surprised. So then you place this on a baking sheet. And try to get a large enough baking sheet so it's pretty much a single layer. What I sometimes do is just shake it around. So this goes into 250-degree oven for 1.5 hours, and you stir it every half hour so that it doesn't burn, that you get things coated. So 250 degrees for 1.5 hours, stirring every 30 minutes. So we'll place it in the oven. Now what my mother did is she always added something called cheese tidbits. They were little elongated Cheez-Its. So what you could do once it's all baked, if you wanted to, and we don't because we're dairy-free, you could add some wisps for some cheddar cheese wisps to simulate that, or you can make your own. And I do have a recipe for Cheez-Its. And for Cheez-Its, you buy very thin sliced cheddar cheese. And my recipe says use Sargento because at the time that was the only really thin slice. This I got at my local Food Lion. So you just cut these in quarters, place it on parchment paper lined baking sheet, and you bake it. I don't have the exact time and temperature right now, but that will be in a link. But what I would do if you were making them just for the Chex Mix, I would probably make them in smaller slices so that they're more like the size of the cheese tidbits that my mother used to put in her Chex Mix. Now, as I said, it takes about 1.5 hours in the oven, not about 1.5 hours in the oven, stirring every 30 minutes. And while I love having you in my kitchen, I don't think you want to sit around for 1.5 hours, and I don't have coffee made, so we wouldn't be drinking coffee and eating muffins. So I made some yesterday. And this is what it looks like all made. As you can see, the nuts, and there aren't too many because I only put in half of the nuts that it called for. So again, your macros will change, and it depends on what you like. And this is absolutely delicious. Every time I eat this, I think of my mother. So here's to my mom. Oh, this is so good.